Last Pint Productions presents the New Way podcast. The New Way contains adult content including... What was that? Seriously, did anyone hear that? No? Okay. As I was saying, the New Way contains adult content including...
I'm gonna get ya!
What? Hey, this is not cool. What is this? Okay, adult content including...
Join us.
Ginas? What about Ginas? Spirit, reveal yourself! Oh, fuck this. Listener discretion is advised.
You're gonna die!
Ah!
Are you lost, sweetheart? Are you afraid, honey? Well, why don't you come with me?
Don't fall asleep.
I know you gentlemen have been through a lot, but when you find the time, I'd rather not spend the rest of this winter tied to this fucking couch!
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me. I'm naked.
Will you help teach me about this?
What is it?
What is it?
A new way?
A new way?
A new way? Way? What way? Way? It's the new way. Wow.
Talking over the intro knows. That's how you know you're in rare form.
Wow.
Man, you guys are coming in hot.
We already did the Owen Wilson wow intro.
Yeah, we did. Last week we did an entire Owen Wilson wow opening.
Did you not hear that, Nick?
Wow.
It was a lot of Owen Wilson. Welcome to the New Way podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Matt, and I'm here in the studio with Ben Wilson.
I'm here.
And, of course, Nicholas Santa Croce.
Present.
Okay, that was... What kind of hand motion was that you just did for the present?
The velveteen touch of a dandy fop.
Now, I have a question for you, Nick.
I think it was like the craps. It was like the lucky 7-year-old.
Shooting money. Shooting nines. I don't know what that means, but I've never shot... I don't know what... Shooting sevens. I don't know what it... I don't know. I don't gamble.
You have to watch Sports Night. Really good episode,
Well,
too.
listen, I've watched a lot of Guys and Dolls, but I still don't know how to play craps. So that's my problem. That's me. I got to deal with that. So Nick, I have a question for you before we kind of get into the podcast here. Have you noticed that your corner of the room is more aromatic than normal? Do you have a
I do not like.
Hold on,
where this
wait.
is going.
Is this the preface for an ad read? Do we have a sponsor?
No, I wish we did. That would be fantastic. But no,
meanwhile, Glade Candles.
Try new Glade plugins. Makes your podcast studio smell great.
I honestly have no idea how you're even standing it. To be honest, I got a.
Is there vomit?
I got a Geek Fuel.
What the fuck are you talking about?
I got a Geek Fuel that came this month, and it had a Rick and Morty air freshener on it. And I was like, oh, this would be fun to hang on Nick's mic. And then I opened the bag, and man, is that like a potent smell. Enough that like when I walked into the office today, it was noticeably...
I would describe it as like a spicy, fresh laundry.
Yeah, well, I was about to say, there was definitely a different pungent sort of odor in here, different than the usual pungent odor that we get when we walk into the studio.
He's saying I smell because I work in here.
No, I was just saying that there's lots of cum stains in here. No, I'm sorry.
Ew. There have been, as far as I know...
Hey, listen, Paul Mamalito has been in this house since the last time I was here. So
I'm struggling to find the relatability in cum smelling really bad.
Well, it doesn't really smell. It's more just like pennies.
It's not something that is categorized as
normally good smelling, but this time it smelled really bad.
Or even pungent.
But all of the things,
it is very pungent.
all of the things that surround that happened prior, all the things that happened prior to ejaculation, with sweaty bodies moving about, that does create a very specific odor that just smells like, dong.
Today I learned Ben and Matt's cum smell really bad.
We have look, we've got some.
Why are you plenty of pineapple?
This is disgusting. Guava.
What has happened?
I don't know. I really don't. You. It all started by you trying to scare me with this air. The thing is,
I mean, does it not smell?
it
like
doesn't smell
really like. I mean, like
when I put my nose up against it, it's very.
I mean, when I got over to that side of the room, I could smell.
Really?
Yeah. That's why I was curious.
Not annoying me.
Oh, then my prank backfired, and enjoy your new little.
It's pleasant.
Hangamabobber.
Can we edit out that whole cum part? I was really,
Yeah, that's fine.
it's really not funny.
I'm not editing out any of the
No,
cum.
I'm very
Why-
uncomfortable now.
Well, I guess someone doesn't want the cum part to happen. I think that's one of the most important parts. In
Kumquat.
fact,
That's what this smells like. I was trying to place it. It's fruity.
don't
but
you
it-
go changing subjects.
it
I was about to
all
make
makes
I was about to
sense.
tie it all together.
Oh, sorry.
That was the
Say-
M. Night Shyamalan twist at the end of that.
Right. Anyway. Oh no, we got a few things to get to
Oh,
before
no,
that.
actually, there's something else I want to bring
Oh
up
no,
before we get into it.
do it. Go for it.
No, that kind of correlates to the topic, so go ahead with
Okay.
what you were going to ask.
So one of the things I want to talk about was kind of interesting is I was talking to one of our former guests on the show, Paul, last week, and he mentioned that he had gone on a date to see Crazy Rich Asians, which he gave his normal Paul review of the worst movie he's ever seen, just categorically unwatchably terrible.
Wow.
Which is
Yes.
worst movie with Paul? It means worst movie he has seen since the last movie he saw.
This is usually correct, and he attempted to try to say that wasn't the case. He really was. It really was a different situation. So,
I just think Paul's racist.
well, so I'm curious because that is a movie with a super high Rotten Tomatoes rating. It was a August sleeper, which is historically one of my favorite things in cinema is the month of August.
It was
because
actually
there's almost always
it was released in September, wasn't it? It was, yeah,
it came out. I thought in August, end of August, middle of August.
wasn't it last weekend or something? Or it may have been the last weekend or like the very.
It's been out for a while. It's been out for
So
a
it was
while.
at the dregs of August. It was like
Yeah.
the very last days of August.
Oh man! Ever since you brought it, now I can't not smell this now. I really didn't.
Semen or the.
I
Or the
didn't take any notice to this, and now it's overwhelming. Thanks.
So take it down.
So take it down.
I
Throw it
can't,
at Ben. It'll make his fingers
can't
smell.
deal with this right
I think you've been fondling it because now I smell it more than I did before.
I didn't touch it.
It's like the kryptonite in,
It
in the
knew.
first Superman movie where it's like wearing it as a necklace. It's like, ah, no.
I didn't notice it. Now it's like unbearable. God damn it!
Got in your head. When
Anyways.
I did it.
Damn
So,
you.
So to continue
yeah.
that.
So I love the August, the month of August for sleeper movies, and sometimes they're sleeper blockbusters. Like you have The Fugitive was a big August release that people thought it was going to be good. Like it could be a good movie, but it was like a huge movie.
Right.
And you have Guardians of the Galaxy was an August release that people thought was going to be pretty good. That wound up being a huge movie. You have probably what I would consider the precursor to Crazy Rich Asians, which is My Big Fat Greek Wedding. So that was the first thing I asked Paul. I go, you hated.
How is that the precursor? Because there's an ethnicity that in the
It's
title of it.
almost exactly the same plot line of
Is it?
showing a culture based on a wedding.
Almost the exact same
It's
plot.
almost
it's a
exactly the
wedding?
same
Wow.
movie.
Okay.
So, like, yeah, that's why I thought they were. So I asked. That was the first thing I asked Paul when I said, you hate this movie. You go, first of all, why did you go see it? But second of all, did you like My Big Fat Greek Wedding? He goes, yeah, I fucking love that movie. Because that's a great movie and funny and awesome. But this movie's terrible. And
Suspicion proven.
no, so I think it's an interesting question when you talk about your expectation.
Did ABBA
for-
do the music for My Big Fat Greek Wedding?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think there's a lot of Greek music.
Wait, is Mamma Mia the same thing as My Big
No,
Fat
that
Greek-
is a totally
It's a
different
thing. Okay,
totally
sorry.
different thing.
Keep going.
So the question is this, and Nick and I, we had a similar issue this year with Black Klansman. When a movie is super highly rated and appeals maybe to a specific crowd, and it doesn't have to be necessary. I mean, My Big Fat Greek Wedding fits in this as well because it's a rom-com. That there are going to be people that just show up to My Big Fat Greek Wedding, despite whether it's made well or not, that just don't care for that type of
I
movie
thought
and
this
they're
was
not
My
going to like
Big
it.
Fat PHAT Greek
No,
Wedding.
no.
This movie's bullshit.
So the idea, the question kind of is this: at what point do you concede a movie is made well, but just wasn't made for you, or at what point does a movie cease to be actually a good movie? So, and I look at this in general, thinking about Marvel movies, right? So a lot of people will shit on Marvel movies. Ethan Hawke famously, in the last couple of weeks, went on a rant about how Marvel is ruining films as we know it.
Actually, if you read his quotes, his entire quote in context, I don't entirely disagree with him. But,
okay, but it's interesting. But he doesn't seem to enjoy these movies in any capacity,
that's
right?
his prerogative.
No, and that's kind of the question. Is that I enjoy Marvel movies, but I also recognize they're not perfect films.
No,
they're just movies I happen to enjoy because they cater to kind of my sensibilities.
Iron Man 3 is a masterpiece, and I wouldn't change a single
I do
goddamn
like
frame.
Iron Man 3, but so I don't like Iron Man 2, but I like Iron Man 3.
Then you will like the season premiere of season 2 of Master of None with the fake manufactured relationship with the child character.
I love a good child character. We
enjoy
talked about
that
short round.
first episode.
I was glad you said character there at the end. I love a good child.
I was just kind of curious in general. Are there movies that you have felt everyone else was very complimentary about, that you really just felt you completely disagreed, but you still understood that it was a well-made movie?
Well, so there is one that is really tops of my list, which is a movie I don't love, but that I recognize why it's such a good movie and why it's a Best Picture winner, and that's No Country for Old Men, because it is not nearly in the pantheon, close to my top 5 Coen Brothers movies. I respect the way it was made. And
it's not even close to top 5?
No.
Like your
not even
least
close.
favorite Coen Brothers movie?
It's like bottom 3.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, I love the performances, but the structure of the movie does something. Because here's for me the thing, and then, like I said, it's for me. It's a thing for me. It treads the line between being a Western and then being a like caper movie, and then being this kind of like offbeat comedy at times when it comes to like the relationships between some of the characters who know each other. And it's
well, don't watch Buster Scruggs. From what I've seen,
it's a very strange kind of mishmash of Coen staples, and it doesn't really congeal for me. Now, while I was watching the movie, I even said when I walked out of the movie, I was like, "That movie's gonna win Best Picture." I was like, it was good. I didn't love it, but it's gonna win Best Picture. Because it's such a well executed movie from a filmic standpoint. Like I really did think it was a well executed movie, but it did not. That movie did not speak to me. Actually, my favorite scene in the movie is the last scene in the movie. The scene with Tommy Lee Jones and his wife in the house, and that's
because you're also in love with her.
What?
You're in love with what's her name?
Well, I wasn't even talking about Kelly MacDonald.
Kelly MacDonald.
No.
Is she funny or something?
No, I am. Kelly MacDonald is one of my favorite actresses. I always, her and Melanie Linsky are like the two women that I'm just like, I would watch anything that they do, and I love their talent, but I also think that they're just beautiful women. So, anyways, that was the one for me.
Oh yeah, beautiful girls.
Beth is well aware of this.
She knows. And what about you, Nick? Do you have any that you?
Well, I just want to revisit one quick thing. I think it's actually proof that Paul isn't racist. That he's just so unapologetically like, I saw that Asian movie and it's the worst movie I've ever seen. He's so like disconnected. Most people would say like, oh, I thought it was great. I'm really glad that it's out there. And yes, they didn't make it for you because you're
I think
dude.
Other than like mentioning the title of the movie, I don't think he said the word Asian once in his critique of everything that he hated about it. But it's interesting.
He's very overtly critical, and he's also one of those people that just there's no middle of the road for Paul, where he's just like, it's either it's the worst movie ever, or oh, it's so awesome, it was the best movie ever. Like that's the spectrum for Paul. It's either on that end or this end. So
or the her end, which he loved,
or the
apparently.
or the her end, where he's just basically
really
can't contain his
really
own
connected
excitement.
to that film.
The crying, the ones that make him re-examine his soul. Now, Nick, actually, that's kind of you could do a partner series to Has Jeremiah Seen It called Does Paul Think This Is the Best or Worst Movie That's Ever Been Made?
It's either yes or no.
It's either It's either
Does
yes
Paul
or no. think Jurassic Park is the best movie ever made? And he's going to come out and say one thing or another.
That's tough.
Now, what about you? Nick, do you have any kind of issues that you've had with movies where you really just you don't understand? I mean, we talked a little bit about Black Klansman and that something was missing for me in that movie, and it's one of those where I'm reading every review and every person I know on the planet is talking about how much they love this movie, and I just didn't respond. It didn't work for me.
I think it's fine not to agree with something that's overwhelmingly well reviewed.
Sure.
I think that we agreed on this. We walked out of the theater just thinking like it's a fascinating subject. It's made by a really good, competent filmmaker, but I just kind of checked. I wasn't really invested the entire time I was in the theater, and that was it. It's very simple for me to lay out. But if I try to think of the last movie that was like very, very, very well loved that I hated, I don't know if I could come up with one off the top of my head.
Okay.
I wish I did. I know there have been some in the past. I can't think of it though.
It was very interesting to me because I'm hearing this review and it's one of those movies that like I haven't gone to see Crazy Rich Asians, but I mean it is like a 96 on Rotten Tomatoes. Like it's some like ridiculously high fucking rating. Which normally stuff that's like that's above that 90 range, I'm gonna find something I enjoy about it, and I haven't watched it. I may completely disagree with Paul watching that movie.
I do really think that it's cool that it is in theaters. I heard that they turned down a huge deal to have that go to Netflix, which would have meant more money probably in their pocket, but they wanted the exposure. They wanted the first all-Asian cast in anything since American Girl basically be in theaters, and someone like Paul Mammalito to go see it in the theater. That wouldn't have happened if it was streaming.
This is true.
It's kind of amazing, and I know nothing about the movie. I've been avoiding films that have used to work on the show that I got fired
I was
from.
about to say avoiding Constance Wu.
Yeah. I love it. He couldn't say her name. He was avoiding the name, avoiding saying the name. Then you said it, and he flinched.
I'm sorry, avoiding.
Actually, that air freshener keeps Constance Wu out of the room. So don't worry, she can't hurt you here. You're safe.
Actually,
Nick.
I didn't say anything bad about Constance Wu.
One other I could briefly mention, even that I remember that was just blown out of proportion when it came out was Juno, and I was just like, yeah, it's a fine movie. Meanwhile, Jason Reitman,
It's a fan movie.
but then meanwhile, Jason Reitman then goes and does Up in the Air, and I was just like, that is a amazing, just nuanced, brilliant film.
And thank you for smoking. I like almost all of Reitman's.
Well, so
shit.
but I was just like, compared to Juno, yeah, exactly. Thank You for Smoking and Up in the Air are much better films overall. I was just like, yeah, it's kitschy, it's fun, I guess.
You're right, man.
Juno's also interesting because I'm very curious to see how a movie like that ages because it is so set.
It's so tied
in the
to
time.
2007.
But then you also think that there's going to be at some point you're going to get that 2007 nostalgia is going to kick in, and all of a sudden Juno is going to be
I don't know
how they talked.
I don't know anybody who's going to be nostalgic for 2007.
All right, listen, home skillet.
Come on, that's Dwight Schrute talking right there.
Did anyone ever call anyone home skillet before that
Battlestar Galactica?
Are you going to ask if did anyone say home skillet before that movie or after that movie?
I did say that.
You said home skillet?
I think literally one person has ever called someone home skillet, and it was Dwight Schrute in Juno.
Yeah, it was one time that word was used outside of a Grandy's.
No, 3 times, because there was 3 takes, and that's literally it.
And I think the only other one little thing I wanted to very briefly bring up before we get into our topic, and Ben, I want to let you also lead into whatever you've got.
Yeah,
is I held this from last week. So the Oscars have now rolled back their most popular movie category.
They listened to our episode. They listened to us. We're making a difference, Matt.
They are literally basing all of the new Oscars around what Black Panther says about their movie publicly, and that is fascinating to me. So Nick, you were the first one that actually brought that up. That I hadn't really quite made that leap where you're like, this category is existing so they can give Black Panther an Oscar. So then Black Panther comes out and goes, well, fuck your popular Oscar. We want your real Oscar.
That's what
And then the Oscars are like, well, we're not going to do that category anymore because the movie we wanted for it isn't going to win.
But see, I mean, you just think about
That's
it.
what I was saying.
Just imagine being a studio.
amazing.
Just imagine being a studio and the peripherals around being like, well, we're not going to put this up for the actual Oscar, but we're going to put this up for the popular Oscar. And all of the people involved in that movie just being like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
It's short-sighted because some years you're going to have a film like Black Panther that is
Panther. It's a Black Panther.
One year,
Panzer. tank movie.
The Flam Panther.
No, we're not making fun of you, Nick. It was just funny. I get made fun of all the time on here.
Sometimes I don't use words right.
I'm gonna mute
that-
myself.
Sometimes I don't talk good.
That was one of those times. And all I'm saying, attempting to say, is that I want to measure my words very carefully. 1 year, you'll have Black Panther.
King
which will-
Malkovich.
God damn it.
Sorry.
It'll be significant from a pop culture angle, and it will also be significant from a cultural angle. And you get that perfect storm, right? That the Academy Awards will be happy to hand over an Oscar.
Like Venom.
Yeah, right, but it's short-sighted because the next year when Snakes on a Plane, the reboot becomes a pop culture phenomenon. Then what do? Say fuck you guys? Well, where's the definition of a popular movie Oscar? If it was
first of all-
popular, it should win.
First of all, it's still voted on. It's not like it's not like it's being tallied by whatever the box office
you
count
try
was.
voting against Snakes on a Plane too.
No, like I see. I'm upset because I actually like that category. I also think it's completely ridiculous to call one Oscar a real Oscar and one Oscar not a real Oscar when we have the technical Oscars and there's a whole bunch of Oscars that don't even make the show because they're so deep dive shit that a lot of people don't know about and don't frankly care about. To be honest,
there are people that have
Right?
best comedic score Oscars though.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Which is
that less
awesome.
of an Oscar?
No,
Kind of.
No, I don't. First of all, why should a comedic score be less than a dramatic score? I think that's bullshit. I think there's room.
You're talking to somebody who obviously agrees with you, but like
I think there's room for the popular Oscar.
now
and I hope
the
they bring it
standard
back.
is there's only one Oscar for score, and that's it. But there's a time where 2 were given out in a year. Are they any less? Like they kind of are, because it's not the standard Oscar anymore. So it is less innately. So when things change.
So everything is less than the first time there was an Oscar.
It's about consistency, not being first. And the consistency was not there for the best comedic score, best dramatic score. So now the person who's like, don't you remember in 1995 I won the best comedic score? And they're like, but was it best score, buddy? And they go, no, because it's not the standard.
That's bullshit. So that's saying best supporting actor is not as good as best actor.
Well, it's not. One is more supporting.
First and foremost, we're talking about an Academy that awarded the greatest show on Earth an Academy Award back in the 1950s. So I think we can pretty much say, doesn't matter what they. I mean, they're going to mess stuff up no matter what it is. that they do.
I guess that's kind of
I don't
also
get that joke. What was that?
I think that's
The greatest show, that was actually a Best Picture winner, and it's a terrible
What was?
movie. The Greatest Show.
Oh.
not the greatest show on earth, the new Hugh Jackman movie. No, I think, look, I think part of it is that I feel in general the Oscars are a little bit ridiculous.
Sure.
As they are, although I love them. I fucking love watching that show. I love thinking about who's going to win. I love debating the performances on it.
Who
But
hosted the year with James Franco, who is like totally checked
Anne
out?
Hathaway.
It was Annie.
it was Annie Hathaway.
Poor Annie Hathaway. Do you remember, I remember never watching something more uncomfortable than Anne Hathaway struggling to stay like doggy paddle afloat as James Franco just set a torch to the Academy Awards. Like less shits were ever given.
I didn't even mind it that much while I was watching because I was just like, wow, they're really going for it. And
she
I
looked
just realized-
upset.
Yeah.
She looked like super upset at him. It was r/cringe in Reddit talk.
And it's so funny because I think that's also like I am an Oscar fanboy in general, despite the problems I have with it.
I used to be.
But I've watched every Oscar since fucking 92 when I used to watch them with my mom back in the day. And
Is that Yuli's goal that year?
yeah, 92 was Scent of a Woman
Hoo-ha!
and
was
Silence of the
91.
Lambs.
Yes, that's right. Well,
Yeah.
it was the 92
91,
Oscars.
it was 92,
91
yeah,
was
so,
you're right.
It was a Scent of a Woman or a Silence of the Lambs.
Which we might have a little bit of discussion about one of those in a bit. But anyway,
It's a thriller. It's a thriller, not a
and
horror.
I completely agree with you.
I know what you're going to
so
say,
we're
buddy.
gonna get there. We'll
I
get
know
there.
what you're going to say, buddy.
But yeah, I think it's super interesting, and I think that I love watching all of the drama and the ridiculousness behind it all. But just fucking do it. You want to make a popular Oscar category? Make a fucking popular Oscar category.
And
Like,
don't
own it.
and don't bend to the whim of
exactly.
of
It's a bunch of
Marvel.
bullshit.
Well, before we get into the
We
topic,
live in the age of bending to the whim of the.
yeah, it's true.
Bend into the women, am I right?
Ooh.
All right, guys. Well, hey, we
That's
have
as spicy as this air freshener.
we have a very special beer that we're drinking here. This is
yes.
2018 vintage BDCS, and it's warmed up to the perfect temperature right now. And so, yeah, let's cheers.
Wow,
boys.
you just drank right away. You didn't even wait for me.
What?
Yeah, that's a good fucking beer.
I have never heard a Ben Wilson sip as audible as the one you just let. Or was that? No, that was you.
That was Nick.
He is not. He's not put anything in his mouth.
What? That wasn't me.
If it was Nick, he just threw his voice.
I just went.
No, before that, you had an audible swallow. And
It was me.
nice.
It was me.
Well, now we can put it on the board.
It was me, and it wasn't a swallow. It was just a body noise, like a. It was like a your stomach growling, but it was my throat.
Oh, there you go.
What, so
I got it.
it
It was
I
a
got it
throat
wrong.
growl. It was me.
It was Nick.
Like you're double
can't-
fisting of it. This
Listen,
is delicious.
I'm not gonna shaggy you. It was me.
This is This is quite delicious.
Nothing for the shaggy joke. Nothing.
No.
Anyways, well, there you go.
Fuck
So,
you
anyways,
guys.
the question I was going to ask is, did anybody watch the Netflix trailer for the new series, Haunting on Hill House?
I have not.
Haunting
I have
on-
not.
Hilling
it
on
look?
haunted hell.
How's it look?
It looks really good, and it was done by that guy, Mike Cavanaugh. He did like Oculus, and he did Hush.
He's gonna join the Supreme Court. He
Hush?
may have assaulted a woman.
Yes, and he.
That's not the same guy.
Oh, different guy.
That's a different Kavanaugh.
Fuck all Kavanaughs, as far as I'm concerned.
He recently did
That
that.
was actually a really good job.
He did that movie that was based off the Stephen King book, where the woman gets strapped to the bed and her husband like.
Oh,
Misery.
Not Dolores Claiborne.
Misery.
No,
Misery.
Jerry's Game.
Yeah.
Jerry's Game. Yeah,
wait,
yeah.
wait, what? There's a different.
It's
It's
with
Misery.
no, it's Jerry's Game.
James Caan is
No, the woman.
handcuffed
No,
in
it's
the bed.
an
you don't
S&M. It's an
understand.
S&M thing.
It's an S. So they're like trying to rekindle
Like
their
the
marriage.
BDSM
She
beer you
gets-
give us?
And it's what's her name from
It's Carla Gugino.
Carla Gugino. Yes,
Carla
yes.
Gugino.
And her husband's Bruce Greenwood in the movie, and so
Spy Kids.
they're trying to spice up their marriage. So he handcuffs her to a bed and then has a heart
right.
attack and dies.
Yes. That's a great premise. God, that's a great. It's a Netflix film.
It's a Stephen King premise.
Yeah, that's so
Just,
good. It's such a good, scary premise.
It's Gerald's Game.
Gerald's Game.
Gerald's
that's it,
Game.
yeah,
Okay, yeah.
So this is a good
So
insight
is that a horror premise or is that a thriller premise?
Well, if you understand what happens in the book, it's a horror premise.
okay.
Yeah.
I don't know those details.
I'll shed just a little bit of light into. The cat's out of the bag. We're going to be discussing horror movies tonight.
Horror!
But let me give you just a glimpse into young Matt Shank's child. Do you know why I know the name of that book?
Horror.
Do you know why I know the name of that book? I fucking was going to pull the horror clip, and I was like, this is gonna be so perfect for tonight, and
you
then
didn't.
I totally forgot.
It's okay. It's okay.
Just Ben, you do it. I'm hitting the button right now. Click. The horror.
I didn't like it.
Okay, someone just talked about a horror, and I don't know what's going on. But so I know Gerald's
The
Game
whore, her?
because my mom was a fanatic of Stephen King and
Of course.
Anne Rice.
Yeah.
So Gerald's Game was like a book that just happened to be like on mom's bedstand, and she's like, "Oh yeah, this is about this woman who gets handcuffed," and I was just like, "I'm 10, or 11," and I'm like, yeah, "This doesn't seem like I should be
The
discussing this
unadaptable
movie
book.
with my mother." But so we are going to be talking about horror movies. Now, this is not to be confused with Halloween movies, and lest you forget, ladies and gentlemen out there in the world, we are coming up in just 2 episodes to our famed Halloween episode, 2nd annual Halloween episode. And if you don't think this episode is going to be amazing, why don't you listen to this very quick clip? This is our Slurred Sophisticate based on last year's Halloween episode.
Oof.
Welcome to another edition of the Slurred Sophisticate, where we slow down portions of a podcast you probably didn't listen to in order to make it funnier. So, without further ado, please enjoy the Slurred Sophisticate.
You sighed, Pete?
I think I'm sorry. I love this one.
All right. Well, while you're eating,
Oh no.
Ben, why don't you tell
your favorite part about Halloween? Oh, God. I don't understand you. I thought I would hate this turning my
What's my
out.
favorite part about Halloween?
Oh, this is...
God.
Nerds wrapped around some... It's Nerd Rope, motherfucker!
There it is. There it is.
Nerd Rope? I don't like the rope. I like
Rope's the best
nerd
part.
of it, but the rope is no good. Oh, fuck you, the rope. No, I don't like that rope thing.
This has been another lousy edition of the Slurred Sophisticate. Join us next time for more shenanigans.
I don't like that rope thing.
I had legitimately forgotten about the slowed down version of that, and I listened to it this afternoon. I'm doing it now. I was crying, laughing at that clip. So
The origin of the famous "It's a Nerd Rope" motherfucker drop.
Yeah, I mean that is our number N on our podcast.
Nerd Rope, motherfucker!
I really do like Nerd Rope. I mean,
But yet, the more famous and more oft used.
Any more treats?
See, I'm gonna know you,
Perfectly
Ben.
done.
I have started to hard code some of these in for letters. So when you started to say like you wanted to play any more treats, I know that's T for treats, and I just hit
Any more
T and let's go. Or if I'm looking for Nerd Rope,
It's Nerd Rope,
And
motherfucker!
that's under N. And what do we think we do when your wife loves it?
oh, good for you.
It's a big old
Shit.
B. Yeah, she gets the B. Yeah.
B for Beth.
No, Bale was moved to O for.
Oh, good for you.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's appropriate.
So our topic.
Beth got B. Bale
B
gets
makes-
O.
that's
That makes
right.
sense. That makes sense.
Our topic, now that we are finally getting to it,
is horror movies. The things that you watch to make you feel better about your life that's not being terrorized by some horrible.
is that the reason we
Thing.
watch horror movies? I'm not
I
sure.
think there's some alleviation of I'm not in danger. I'm not. I my world is crumbling, but my world is not as bad as these poor people here. They're being terrorized by some
I
such.
don't really see it as a
phantasm.
correlation to your own life. I mean, I see it as
Well,
like
Ben, it's funny you bring that up because I would like to bring up a genre of horror that is well established.
Torture porn?
No, zombie movies always get into fashion, and of course it's huge on AMC, right? But zombie films are.
I thought you meant zombie movies focus on fashion. I was like, that's a really interesting topic.
I was like,
bringing up.
because this is thriller.
I've never thought about the fashion of zombies.
Fashion zombies is literally a song by the
By the
Aquabats.
Aquabats, I love that song.
Literally a
It's off of
song by the
charge.
Aquabats. You should put that in the disclaimer background music. It's amazing. But the cool thing about zombie films, for the most part, historians went back and looked. When did some of the more influential, iconic zombie films come out, and why? And it's almost always because of the social climate. It's almost always precipitated because of something that was happening politically or in the world. And I forgot the article, but I read it. It's amazing, and it really breaks down like every once in a while it slows down and comes back, but it's always at heightened moments in history.
Well, I mean, it's interesting what you're saying. Because Night of the
It's a
Living,
reflection.
Night of the Living Dead was Romero's. I mean, like it was one of the first movies to have
Quintessential horror, the birthplace of horror. If you talk, Black Sabbath is the birthplace of metal.
I mean, there are Frankenstein and Dracula movies back in
Nosferatu or Vampire. or
Now,
any of
now we'll
those.
say I believe
I feel like it's really that to me is ground zero of the modern, definition of horror.
I believe this can sum up Nick's argument.
You think it takes talent to play Frankenstein? It's all on makeup and then grunting.
So you agree with you agree with Bela Lugosi.
Bela Lugosi. Well, so
Black Hawk Landau.
No, but anyways, I'll
That was bad.
What?
Anyway,
laying down.
But what I was saying is Night of the Living Dead, obviously, Romero had one of the first male protagonists in like an all-white movie. Like, I mean, everybody else in the movie was white, and then you
He's a
had
black male as the
a
lead.
black male as the lead,
And a romance with a white woman.
and a romance with a white woman in the middle of the civil rights movement. And then, of course, you have Dawn of the Dead, where there's all sorts of stuff about, like, there's consumerism and kind of criticism of all of that. So I agree with you on that. I completely disagree with the premise that the horror genre started with Night of the Living Dead.
I didn't say start. I think it was refined to the modern.
I think the
definition.
zombie movie was refined in that, but I don't think the horror movie was.
All right, so I think actually there's a common ground of both.
I love
right.
this conversation though. What is horror?
Well,
there are many subgenres.
So
I already said metal, right? I feel like metal music to me reminds me of horror, not just thematically, but there are so many subgenres. There's that overwhelming sense of doom in both metal and horror films.
Well, I think so. There's kind of two different discussions here, and we'll come back to I think the cycle of horror, which is sort of what you guys are talking about when you say where's the birthplace. I think horror has been reborn every several number of years in different ways, and I think there are pinnacle movies at the birth point of each of those different variations on horror.
Yeah, sure, that's
but yeah, I think okay, so the first question is
definitely, and that reminds me, in comics they call it like a golden age. They say the death of Gwen Stacy is an event that changed comics moving forward, and it bookended what your traditional understanding of what comics were and ushered it into a new.
Well, and by the way, not all of these changes are necessarily good. Some of them spawned a lot of bad films. But let's first talk about.
I agree.
I think the first thing we were sort of hinting at earlier is what is the difference between horror versus thriller versus suspense? And I think the one that always comes to my mind is as a really good example. I'll play you one of the songs from it. You're gonna think it's something, but it's something else. This is a movie with an iconic horror villain. An iconic horror villain, but I don't feel it's a horror movie, and it's Silence of the Lambs. I think Hannibal Lecter is a great horror.
It's a suspense
character,
movie.
Yeah, right. But it's a suspense thriller movie, the same as Basic Instinct. So let's talk about the rules of horror. Now, I know you guys are going to have some ones that buck these rules. So I actually want to hear those because I actively didn't even try to think about it.
Can we play Wild Horses softer in the background? Just keep it low background. I want to play it. Just real low. Real low.
Very, very, very low.
Right.
Men like it real low. I know.
So one of the things that I came to is, in general, a horror movie has some sort of supernatural or sci-fi element to it. Now, I know there are ones that do not fall into that, but honestly, I didn't think very hard, and I couldn't come up with a lot of examples.
Well, so it depends on what you believe by supernatural or sci-fi, because like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is definitely one of the quintessential horror movies,
and that it completely is the one that proves the rule. Exception that proves the rule.
Yeah, and does not necessarily have any sort of supernatural or
other than the sequels where characters live on or become. I totally agree with that one.
Ridiculous.
No,
but if you talk about like a Ted Bundy film, whereas. It's at the end of the day, it's grounded in real characters. If you go Ed Gein, or you look at history, right? The movies that were based on real serial killers, Manson. Look, take your pick, right? That they're still based on larger than life characters, not your average killer, not your average person in jail for murder.
It's still true crime, though.
It's true, but those characters, and I say characters deliberately, right? Because Ted Bundy and
Dahmer
superseded. They became Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees in a way.
But those are like, are you talking about movies, or are you just talking about in popular culture? Because
look, if you go Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that a lot of that borrows from Ed Gein, and a lot of times, many of the horror films say that Ed Gein was ground zero for their killer or the mythology of the killing.
I understand.
I'm just saying some of them could be and listen, Matt, I want to clarify. One of my big rules, once you got around to me, I was going to say some sort of supernatural element is involved in my definition of horror.
I don't think it has to be.
But listen, I also agree it doesn't have to be. I think that for me, it clinches that definition for me if it has it. But if it doesn't mean that it can't be horror. I think that a lot of times you have these films like Texas Chainsaw that is not supernatural, but draws elements from real killers that we've experienced, like American serial killers.
No, I think Texas
And
Chainsaw
at a
is
certain
a
point-
great example
at a certain
of
point-
not supernatural though.
Right, but all I'm saying is I would argue that there is a subgenre of films that are kind of take inspiration from real life serial killers, but they don't just take them from any serial killer. They take it from the ones that become really larger than life
I
and
think
become
unless
characters.
it's about the serial killer, it's not the same thing.
We're also talking about we're not just talking about the best horror movies of all time. Like The Human Centipede is technically a horror movie, and I would classify it as a horror movie. It's not a good
It's
movie.
just a gross movie.
Yeah, exactly. But there's no supernatural element in that movie.
Well, for me,
I understand what you're saying.
For me, it comes down to two things when I'm defining what's
Sure.
hard to me. And obviously, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, right, guys? But here's what I'm saying. Number one, that'll clinch it for me. A thriller rarely has a supernatural element. So I'm delineating that to horror. Okay, my second rule is that it's literally the definition, right, of horror. Are you horrified? Does it invoke a visceral, horrified reaction? And this normally means iconic, gory images.
You mean gore?
No, I don't. Silence of the Lambs is a great combination of horror and thriller, and it's the one that I struggle to define. Ultimately, I go thriller, but there are scenes where, when he escapes and the guard is splayed out and
But you're talking
gutted.
gore.
No,
I mean, that is gore.
I'm saying you can be a straight up horror film if you don't have a lot of gore, but you're punctuated by violent images. And Silence of the Lambs
Like The Ring.
definitely has.
What's that?
You wouldn't call Silence of the Lambs gory, right? But if you just made a collection of
He
freeze
fucking
frames,
eats that guy's fucking face off. Yeah, I'd call it gory. And he
It's-
puts his face on his face. He chews a man's face off and then puts his dead skin on his
it
face.
is not a particularly gory film.
But here is the reason
Because it doesn't show that.
Well, so
listen, the gory thing would be actually showing him detaching the face from the human being and putting it on. We were spared that part of it.
Nick, but here's the thing that for me completely separates Silence of the Lambs as a thriller. I don't believe it's a horror movie. The mechanism,
There's horrific images, cannibalism.
the mechanism of those horrific images, and it has nothing to do. It has to do with the motivations of a character. Of
You
one
can
of the
watch
main
a thriller
characters.
and not be horrified. You can watch something and not be
And so,
physically horrified.
whether you want to call it an elevated horror movie where these horrific images are doing something to further the narrative plot, whereas in a horror movie, it's usually those things that are the plot, like the fact that people are dying and people are getting flayed and people are they're going through all of this. That is the point of the movie. Whereas in a movie like Silence of the Lambs, it's elevated to the point where I feel like that movie's a drama or suspense drama that has these harrowing images. But there is nothing that's to me, what's particularly horrifying about the movie as a whole. It's got scary moments, yeah, but I always feel like those moments are tense more than they are anything else.
Well, right. Well, that perfectly segues into why I call it a thriller, right? When it really comes down to it, what is Silence of the Lambs?
I was about to say, I was just like, what's going on over there?
Nick's pointing his finger in the air, accusatorily.
This will be really easy to edit out. Ready? And cut into it now.
Stop. Just go.
Jesus Christ.
I got a thing in my throat.
I'm going to make fun of you now because you made fun of me that time I was sneezing.
So the end of that film, the finale where you think she's at the right house, but she's not. That's thrilling. When you find out, oh, they're at the cops are at the wrong place. Jodie Foster is there alone with Buffalo Bill. Clarice is fucked. You're thrilled. You're not horrified. Whereas films that a lot, and the thing is, it doesn't mean there has to be a lot of gore, but it's an easy crutch when you're talking about violent, horrific images. And I really think that they call it thriller and horror because it's literally the definitions. Are you thrilled or are you horrified? It's more of a, and that's why it's open to interpretation, obviously, but it's a visceral reaction to what you're seeing. Are you thrilled or are you horrified?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very, very subjective because I find the end of Silence of the Lambs to be terrifying when she's got the night vision goggles on with him
one of
in
the
there.
scariest scenes I've ever seen, but I still don't consider it a horror movie.
I agree.
I equate terror with thriller and horror as being more shocked and just disturbed. That's
Okay.
how I break it down.
No, and that's fine. Ben, do you have anything in addition to kind of those idea or rules that you have?
But so here's the thing: is like, but then
Everyone's
I feel
gonna have their own
There are
rules.
horror movies that I don't necessarily feel shocked and disturbed either. I mean, I feel like so. For example, would you consider The Haunting? Robert Wise, 1964. Would you consider The Haunting one of the quintessential, horror movies of all time, an actual horror movie? Because they show zero. They show zip. They show absolutely nothing.
Well, again,
it's all left to the mind.
It's like Matt said. Yes, that was squarely in horror for its time, but then A Death of Gwen Stacy came along and redefined.
No. It is still
not my point's a little different than that.
100,000% a horror movie.
Oh my
It is
God.
100% a horror movie.
No, I'm just saying it. My point
You asked
wasn't
me
that
a
it.
question.
No, my point wasn't that the changes ruin old horror. I think
I'm not saying that
everything
either.
is based on whatever.
I'm saying
it is.
yes, it is. That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Good God.
It's look. Everything's going to have a portion of the rule that doesn't apply to it. That's why I led with saying Supernatural is a rule that's on my list, but I know that there are ones that break that rule.
all right, I got an idea.
And so
let
that movie
Ben go
obviously,
first.
but that's what I was saying, because The Haunting obviously has a supernatural element. The whole movie is supernatural. I mean,
Sure.
the idea is that they have all these test subjects in a house that's fucking haunted. I mean, that is in and of itself a horror movie, because
Or a ghost story.
This is a horror. I mean, I would call it most
Or
ghost stories a horror.
the thing that you can't. Spirited Beginning. Oingo Boingo had a song on that soundtrack, but I digress. Here's a good example, right? Look at the original Evil Dead. Dabbled in a lot of horror comedy, so although it showed gore and had horrific elements, I think that people would balk at calling that a straight-up horror film, right? Even though Raimi was influenced by horror and has influenced horror.
No,
but
I disagree, actually. I think that it is a straight horror movie. I think that Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn is a horror comedy.
Okay, fair. That's definitely fair. But you tend to group the whole Evil Dead series with 2 An Army of Darkness, which was overwhelmingly... Hold on a second. Overwhelmingly playing up things for comedy.
I want to look, guys. Here's what I want to get to. We all have different.
I was saying the remake of Evil Dead, the modern remake, which you guys both saw back to back, Evil Dead.
We only watched the new one.
Look.
We didn't watch them back to back. I mean, we were just clarifying that.
All I'm saying is that the remake of Evil Dead played things up from a more straightforward horror methodology. I remember seeing that film with the eye and they had images and gore that really viscerally grossed me out in ways that the original Evil Dead didn't even come close. Would I pick Evil Dead as a better film? The first one? Absolutely. But the remake, I think, is a really good example of like playing up my definition of a definition of horror, which is really playing up those images that make you feel disgusted.
That's fine.
What I was trying to get to, so debating the rules is not the point of what I want to get to is, yes, we all have different things that we feel are first of all, Nick, whatever horrifies you is not the same thing that horrifies me or the same thing that horrifies Ben. So the rules are very, very arbitrary no matter what. Even if we just agreed on something that horrifies you, each one of us is going to have the same thing. Go, well, I don't find that horrifying.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that looks ridiculous and silly, and I know it's made of prosthetics, but I find something that's psychological and gets in my head to be more horrifying. That's fine. But what I'm more get into, we're not trying to rush you. Just want to try to get over into kind of talking about some of the specific movies here. It's good. So we each have our kind of ideas.
So I was thinking about my past relationships, and then I watched Her the other day.
Right.
Guys, can you just let me finish this thought for a second?
So
I actually got heard out there on that.
So I
that's
kind
a
of
new
wanted to
thing.
talk. So let's talk a little bit about the cycle of it, because I think that is an interesting kind of idea to look at that. And I think there are certain seminal movies that tended to kind of lead off genres, and I'd probably look at something similar to whether it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Night of the Living Dead or Halloween, but they kind of kicked off the large, imposing, evil, unstoppable male character.
The
force.
monolith.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, well, so if you go earlier than that, I mean, you always had kind of the idea of the creature or the force that was somehow seductive or whatever, and then had, you know, other powers or whatever. And then I feel like in the 40s and 50s and 60s even, you got into a lot of those characters. Or a lot of things where it was things from like it was the unknown. It was you know, the Fly or the Thing or whatever. It was always the Blob. You know, these things kind of coming from other places. and there were these outward forces. And I think it was kind of that new school back in the 70s where you're talking about. Like Texas Chainsaw was definitely a revelation when it came out. I think it was at least it was predicated on the success of a lot of independent films in the 60s and early 70s. I think it actually was like when you had your Cassavetes and when you had your Scorsese's doing these things at kind of lower budgets that didn't really kind of adhere to the popular medium, because if you really think about it, from the late 60s and the early 70s, horror was not dead, but it was not a bankable genre. As a matter of fact, The Haunting was one of the last, you know, really super successful horror films in the 60s, because and
you're still talking about, I mean, that's still almost the birth of cinema. I mean, we talk about the 60s and 70s as if cinema had been around for so long.
Well, it had been around for 40 years, but yeah, I mean,
20 real popular years, but I mean, somewhere around there. But,
we can agree to disagree there. But,
yeah, I understand. But I mean, in general, film
We're
is
talking
still
about
finding
popular
its way.
stylization nowadays, yes.
So yeah, and I think it's interesting, because it was in that type of that part of the genre was the part I responded to the least, and it's part of my makeup as far as when it's same with you guys, really. I mean, growing up in the 80s, slasher films, slasher monster man movies it was huge, and I think part of it is that horror is implicitly cheap to shoot in general.
Sure.
It doesn't require actor, like it's almost never has a famous actor in it. They become famous after they do the horror movie. That's changed a little bit towards where we are now, but in general, they're cheap.
Johnny Depp.
They lend themselves great to
Kevin
sequels and franchises. I mean, they work great. I never liked this one. I never liked the Friday the 13th movies. I didn't see Halloween until probably 10 years ago. I don't think I ever saw any of the Halloween movies until maybe a decade ago. But I grew up on Elm Street. Elm Street was the one that I knew who Jason was. I think I saw a Jason movie. I knew who Mike Myers was. But Freddy was the one that that was my gateway, because for me that was horror. So I wasn't scared of Jason and Mike Myers because they're just guys.
You were scared of the cartoon character Freddy Krueger,
the guy that could get in my dreams and kill me in my sleep. Yeah,
I'll give this all to my opinion over that. I feel like of all of that kind of the quintessential start of what could be considered the slasher genre. The first Halloween is the best movie of all of those.
Once I saw it, I was like, "Holy shit!"
But the Nightmare on Elm Street series is the best series of.
It peaks at 3. The problem with Elm Street, and I watched the TV show.
I've watched all of them.
I watched this TV show. I watched the reincarnation.
Have you watched all of the Halloween and all of the Jason movies? Because they are terrible.
2 words, Matt.
Yeah. Nightmare on My Street?
No, 2 words.
2 words?
You went my second. I would have gone Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff second. The best Elm Street.
3 Dream Warriors. 100%.
Dream Warriors.
First of all, there is. I will say this. I've said it before in the podcast. I will say it again. There is no Dream Writers without the Dream Warriors.
It ain't a horror movie unless there's an Arquette in it. Scream, Dream Warriors.
I had that movie on VHS. I watched it I watched that and Weird Science the same summer, nonstop. And you know what happened? I didn't build a robot girl, but I started thinking about writing a TV show about dreams.
Touche.
Because one of those was sort of doable, or not.
Well, or not.
Now, for you, Ben, what's like? Do you have any ones in the '80s that you were really big into, or what's your kind of horror? Where's your niche?
Well, so I don't really have a niche, I would say, of horror movies necessarily, because I'm kind of all over the spectrum. Like, I like ones that are all over the place. I like really subtle horror movies that are more psychological, and I do like some super...
The Baba Duck Duck Duck.
I do like some super overt, like super crazy slasher, like just blood all over the place. Just let's go overload on the gore. I mean, like Evil Dead 2. I still think I would classify it maybe as a horror movie, but I love that. I mean, like, it's one of my favorite movies, but... the one thing I was going to say is because there were two movies I didn't want to talk about in depth, but I want to talk about my two favorite horror movies of all time, because one is an absolute classic, which is The Exorcist, and then we don't have to talk about it because nobody has to talk about The Exorcist. It's been talked about by everyone. Exactly. So,
what do you think about that deleted scene where she backwards crab walks down the stairs?
Yeah, right.
You into that? I'm serious. Did you like that?
Yeah.
I thought it was creepy.
My friend lived in that house, by the way,
in D.C.
in Georgetown. He
It's D.C., right?
Anyways, so the other movie is my other favorite horror movie of all time, which is Alien. And a lot of people...
About to ask you, what is Alien?
So I think Alien is a horror movie, and it's a horror sci-fi mashup, obviously, but I feel like it's horror first, because here's the thing.
If that alien doesn't pop out of his chest, is it a horror film? That to me is 100% over the edge.
100%.
Yeah, it's a monster
it's a monolith. It's exactly the same. It could be
creature feature.
It could be Jason.
It's hunting them in
it
that
could
ship.
be Jason walking around that ship doing the same thing. They did it in Jason
10.
Jason in space. Jason 10. Jason.
You know what?
in
Actually,
space.
and that's kind of an interesting rule add-on. I think all of us would agree. In horror in general,
The
there tends to
goriest
be...
part is that alien coming out of the chest.
Or it could
gore.
be the alien popping his second face through the other guy's skull and his brains burning all over the
I think
place.
you take those gore moments out. I think one of the things that you have that really hits a horror movie is Predator and Prey. And yes, you do have that in Silence of the Lambs very much, but they're more cat and mouse.
Predator
and
a horror movie?
For one scene, you have that.
The first Predator is a horror action movie, mostly action.
It's an action movie.
But now I will say this.
Alien's a thriller then.
No, and the honest trailers hit on something that's very important to me with the Predator movie. If they don't show that spaceship in the first shot of that movie, that is a straight up fucking horror movie.
No, I disagree. I still think it's an action movie. I just think it's an action movie with mystique, because you don't do everything else you do in that movie. Don't do anything else you do in that movie.
From the X-Men universe?
Look, I didn't say it was a greatly written horror movie, but I think there's something hunting these people that's killing them off. They don't know what it is.
I disagree.
And they're hiding from it.
Look at the cast of that movie. Nobody's scared. I mean,
So
until it gets really into it. I mean, like I don't.
They didn't have time to bleed.
Yeah, they didn't have time to bleed
or act scared.
Or act.
I don't have the energy. I could argue
son
that
of a bitch.
But anyways,
I understand.
You understand my point. And the same thing is the way I say Aliens, the sequel, is
not a horror movie. It's an office drama.
No, that is a straight up action movie.
By the way, Gremlins and Gremlins 2 is exactly commensurate to Alien and Aliens.
It is sort of similar.
More puppets, more crazy puppets, and one is played more for ridiculousness.
Nick, I know you're a big horror buff.
Civilization.
You got me to watch The Omen, which I had never seen before.
How do you like it?
One of my first nights in Florida.
I did, yeah. I enjoyed it. We had scotch and ice cream, and we watched The Omen.
Scotch together?
Yes.
No, I mean like did you put
not a Scotch sundae, but we drank Scotch and ate ice cream and cookies.
That's our band name.
It was
Scotch
good.
Sunday.
But yeah, and it's because like I said, I peaked with Elm Street, and the rest of it I just didn't. And I'll get into where my niche is, but like what is your horror niche, Nick? Like what's the horror that really gets your blood pumping?
Two things, and you already touched on it. Anything religious scares the shit out of me. Exorcist, Omen, because it's grounded in a reality that's so persistent in today's society. Is heaven and hell, and is there Satan, and is there a devil,
and it's something that you don't necessarily believe in, but something that's always there, especially
omnipresent.
Omnipresent
everywhere you look. Totally
with you.
So to me. to me, anything with a religious aspect, I'm not going to go see The Nun, which I heard was terrible, but like the
Part
Omen,
of the Conjuring cinematic universe.
yeah, The Omen and The Exorcist is really like well in there. But my other one is zombies in general, and I feel like why I single out Romero, to me, the whole zombie evolution of horror was a great combination of reality and horror. You have a creature, but it's also people that really existed and were alive, and it was a new crazy spin. And when that first came out, like, people had their minds blown. Romero tapped into something crazy that is like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It keeps getting rebooted every time a different way,
Right.
and it's always just as popular no matter who the audience is.
Right.
And I remember one movie that always stands up for me, and anyone would say it's a horror comedy, but there were images that have stuck with me forever, and it's Return of the Living Dead, which you could say is almost an Abbott and Costello comedy with the two characters.
It's pretty over the top.
It's pretty ridiculous. There's a thriller dance sequence at the end, but then they're also peppering it with a zombie puppet that's cut off at the midsection, and they had must have had a puppeteer, which would have been a great claim for fame, that operated just the spinal cord, that wiggled and flopped on the table as it talked to you. In a movie that is goofy as that, I'll never forget seeing that for the first time, and I was feeling horrified, not knowing whether I could laugh or was disgusted.
Well, that's kind of interesting to me, because I've always found, so when you have Michael Myers is the focus of your movie, right? And when you have Freddy Krueger is the focus of your movie. Zombies were always interesting to me, because zombies are never the focus.
It's a collective.
The zombies are about the people. It's about how the people are reacting to the zombie threat. Whereas these monster movies, typically, sure, you have Laurie in Halloween. You have some of these like strong characters. Typically strong female characters against the male protagonist. But the zombies are much more like, hey, what happens when society breaks down and you have to deal with this outside threat and you do all this shit?
What's more horrifying, Matt?
Which is
one made-up character or humanity gone awry?
I wasn't saying it wasn't horrifying. I was agreeing. Well, it's funny. And so I'll say from my side is I don't particularly like being scared. I don't enjoy it. It's not one of those things I like. I'm going to Halloween Horror Nights in 2 weeks, and I'll do what I do every time I'm there, is I fucking geek out over the theatrics. I'm sitting and I'm looking at the sets. I'm looking at how the scares are designed. I'm looking at all this shit completely removed from the horror side of it. I'll get maybe scared 2 or 3 times, which actually is fun in that context. But that's also why in horror movies, I'm probably the biggest enemy of horror, is that I prefer anything that can be argued as not horror because it's a mashup or it's a deconstruction of the genre. And I'm talking, for me, specifically about one tentpole, which was Scream, which Scream, I think, made or ruined, depending on how you look at it, horror movies as we know them when it came out, and it was 97?
I don't think
96?
I don't think it really super highly affected the genre that much, because I feel like there was a huge turn that came right after that, which was the Ringu and the Ring and all of the move into the remake of the Asian horror. I actually just think Scream's a really just fun horror movie. Like it's a horror comedy.
I know, and I love it, but it was the Emperor's New Clothes. It said, hey, here are all the things that horror movies have been doing to you for 2 decades.
Yeah,
we're gonna make fun of them. So the next time you see them happen in a movie, they're not going to scare you anymore because or you're an asshole.
Right? No,
it was a challenge. It
was a smart. I
love that challenge was spearheaded by Wes Craven, who was one of the mavens of that original genre. That would basically said, I want something new that's different.
Let's be fair. It was spearheaded by Kevin Williamson. Kevin Williamson wrote the script. And he was the one who...
Jesus, Ben, can't you see I'm busy counting money?
But Wes Craven is a smart enough filmmaker, and actually I think a really underrated filmmaker, and really latched on and loved the idea of just saying, okay, let's deconstruct horror. Let's deconstruct it. Let's figure out what's at the heart of it.
No, and I think that was one of those moments that really changed the genre as we know it.
Absolutely.
And another one of those was one that, and I think you were the first person I talked to about this movie, because I did not see it in the theater, which was Paranormal Activity.
Sure.
And Paranormal Activity.
Beth and I saw it in the theater.
No, and I remember
Beth will not watch horror movies, and she watched that movie with me in the theater.
And I was super interested to hear about because I'd kind of read a few things, and Blair Witch belongs in here as well, but Paranormal Activity was really the latch on to the found footage. Blair Witch spawned it, but then it didn't do much with it.
Didn't do much with it.
So Blair,
I mean,
it only became the biggest grossing independent film of all time.
I didn't mean it didn't
beat out
found footage.
It
It didn't make a lot of found footage after it versus Paranormal Activity launched a lot more copies.
What about
Ninja
Wreck?
Turtles?
What about Wreck? Wreck came out well before Paranormal Activity.
It's
did.
true, but I'm talking about what as far as but
And
Wreck's not super popular, was it?
Wreck was the highest grossing Spanish film of all time at one point.
Highest grossing Spanish film.
Yeah, but it was huge. It was all over the world.
I've not seen it.
It got remade in the U.S.
with the girl
movie.
from Dexter. But no. Well, so on your viewing, what is your draw towards horror? Like, what makes horror good for you?
Well, I particularly like the as far as what I love about horror is just because it does really span this wide spectrum, because it has I really love environmental drama horrors where it's just things that are these slow burns where just it puts you on into a state of unease for a certain amount of time. I like
such as
The Witch, a movie that came out,
The Vivitch,
which is a movie I really love.
That's a good movie.
But
tip to our listeners: put on the subtitles.
Yeah,
no, and not super gory.
Not
disturbing
gory
imagery. Disturbing imagery.
Yeah,
disturbing imagery, which would, in my definition, qualify for horror.
Which may stick with you.
Vivitch.
But there are lots of other movies that would fall into that category. Then it goes
The Cell even borrows from this Norwegian painter that I love named Odd Nerdrum, and it's a true story. Google it.
I was called that in high school, and I resent that. I wasn't Odd Nerdrum, and I was told many times.
The best name in all of art, but he did these disturbing, surreal images.
It was like an H.R. Giger for the next generation.
Is it Giger? I always thought it was Geiger.
No, it's Giger.
Giger.
Shit.
But yeah, it's not Geiger. MacGyver, you're thinking of. But even The Cell isn't gory, but it has it relies on punctuated, disturbing visuals, and I think that to me that's the heart of horror. Whether it's done tactfully or it hits you over the head with it, that's it for me.
Yeah, but so there were other. I really like also the horror comedy side, like the ones where they can punctuate scares with some sort of levity, whether that's kind of within the narrative construct.
Perhaps this.
Okay, I swear to fucking God, somebody is talking.
Yeah,
that's Cabin in the Woods, one of my favorite mashups of all time.
I mean that
or deconstruction.
That's another deconstruction. I mean, basically, what Cabin in the Woods is what Scream did.
Yeah,
almost
just better.
Yeah. Well,
I love Scream, but Cabin in the Woods speaks to me. But that's just me.
That's a subjective thing, because I think Scream definitely set the precedent for that.
So in your kind of where your wheelhouse rolls, what's your top? What is one of the ones that you can't get enough of?
Okay, so I'll go to the list really quick, and I know that we're probably over on time already.
We've only been rolling for 2.5 hours, but we've got plenty of time.
I can actually very quickly kind of run through mine. Actually, it's pretty easy.
Spider-Man 3.
When I was a kid, I saw the original Village of the Damned, which was...
is that the bees?
Wicker Man. That's Wicker Man.
Wicker Man. Okay,
no.
I was confused.
And that was Via Wolf who directed it. It came out in 1960. It was George Simpson. Anyways, all it is this. The concept is super simple. Everybody out in a town passes out. They just pass out, and so you see everyone pass out in the town. They wake up, and all of the women who are of the appropriate age become pregnant. Oh. And they all give birth to kids on the same day, at the same time, and they all look exactly alike.
Yeah. Jesus.
And these kids have telepathic powers and basically take over the town when they're 10 years old. And what it comes down to is an alien, basically an alien insemination.
Jesus, that's terrifying.
It is.
Until you got to the alien side, then I was kind of lost.
Well,
but alien insemination. Is that the one? The French guy directed?
Yeah, funny. They don't. But here's the thing: they don't lay into it. They don't get into backstory. They don't explain anything. I'm saying this is stuff that's not even explained in the context of the movie. Everyone's just as confused about what's going on. This is what I am bringing. Oh,
sure.
Obviously, this is an external force because these kids have powers. They have telepathic powers, and they can all communicate to one another. And their eyes glow, and they can control matter. They can move things or whatever, and they can read people's minds. And so, it's a terrifying movie because it's all of these kids, and it was, I believe, the genesis of the creepy kid, because this movie had all of these.
They're called children.
All of the young,
we named them at the Remedies.
Blonde kids in 1960 who would just sit there and say, like, it would be the type of thing where. And I'm not talking about the John Carpenter actually remade the movie in 1995. It wasn't super popular, but the type of where it's like, oh, my bottle was too hot or whatever, and then would force their mother to stick their hand in a thing of boiling water and just keep it there, and then
kill
them, and then that woman would go commit suicide. So it was this very like strange, weird thing, and the whole point of the movie at the end was that the main character, basically, who was their teacher, because they were like, he's the smartest person in town.
He was an
alien. We have to learn from him. No, is that. Essentially, he was like, I have to die. I have to kill these kids. And I'm going to have to set a bomb and then think about something else for long enough before the bomb goes off.
Wow. That's very like Cell. Like Stephen King's Cell has a very similar...
Very similar. But this is 1960, and it's a fantastic movie. Anyways, so that was my favorite when I was a kid. And I'll do the one that's in between really, really, really quick.
Sure.
The one other is that... well, actually, I want to go to the last one. Devil's Backbone. Guillermo del Toro has Supernatural, which is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, because the real reason why that movie is so great is because it brings real world horror into it. It's like this is how horrible people can be. It does the same thing with Pan's Labyrinth, but Pan's Labyrinth is a straight up fantasy drama horror, whereas Devil's Backbone is a straight up horror movie. It involves a dead kid basically walking around, with these young kids in a haunted place. And so the horrific part of it, when you come to the end of the movie, is the horror comes from the human characters and the horror of war and the horror of like the way that people can treat each other, and that's the thing. And so it's a kind of a twist on that in and of itself. The last one I would bring up too, which is my favorite when I have to excise The Exorcist and Alien, which I think are the greatest horror movies of all time, horror, science fiction, and greatest horror, is 1981 Joe Dante, The Howling. I fucking love The Howling.
Wow.
I think The Howling is one of my favorite horror movies of all time because it does mash up the genres really well. It was one of the first movies, and I still can't believe that movie came out the same year as American Werewolf in London. The Howling and American Werewolf in London, the two best werewolf movies ever made, came out the same fucking year.
And that's very much our taste.
The Shining came out the year before that.
Those are our taste to find, because I'll choose American Werewolf in London over Howling every time, and that's my deal.
But here's the thing, you might...
I'm right in the middle between you two.
Because here's the thing, American Werewolf in London is a more artful movie. I would say John Landis made a better movie with American Werewolf in London.
It's funny, it's a mashup though, it's a comedy.
But what Dante did a bunch of really fun stuff. Like the whole sequence of like having sex and turning into werewolves while you're having sex, and like having it be the animalistic, like he's just like, or like whatever, and you see his like his face growing as they're having sex, and the whole like.
How did it sound again?
Yeah, okay. So, anyways, I love...
Isolate that, Matt. Thank you, Matt.
That's what I wanted to do.
I love Joe Dante's take on that movie because it's also a movie that is really weirdly structured, because it starts as like a psycho killer movie. being like, "Where is Eddie? Where is this? Like, where is this? Where is this? A serial killer that's killed all of these people, and they call him Crazy Eddie or whatever." And it's this news reporter who's stuck into a sting, who's trying to connect with him or whatever. It starts out as a completely different movie. And it turns into a werewolf movie halfway through the fucking movie. Yeah, and but when it does, it kind of really it has great moments of horror, great moments of kind of levity, like quick levity. I mean, Slim Pickens is in the movie, is like the fucking head of the place. But anyways,
some Slim Pickens.
For those that haven't seen The Howling, it's a very inventive spin.
Is Scatman Jones in that one?
And
Slim Pickens a real
for
guy.
all of what people will say is the best transformation scene of all time, which is in American Werewolf in London.
Sure.
The transformation scenes in The Howling, which came out the same year, are almost as good. They're pretty good. They're just a tick below it. And the one sequence where somebody finally realizes what's happening at the end of the movie, and gets on the phone and just says, "Oh my God, I just realized what happened," and all of a sudden the werewolf grabs the phone and just goes click, and it looks up.
Send
it's like
more paramedics.
10-foot, werewolf just sitting there. I think that led up to a bunch of like even comedic stuff like
Sure.
happened after that, because it was a terrifying sequence when it happened in the context of the movie, but it was also kind of funny. It was just like, oh shit, yeah, there's like a 10-foot werewolf in the room with her.
Now, what about you, Nick? Where's your bread and butter lie in horror?
I love all the zombie movies from the 80s.
That's your big one.
I love the slasher. I love the slasher movies. I love Friday the 13th. I love Jason Voorhees. I love the Monoliths. I love
so you're a practical over CGI.
Yeah, but to me, it's funny. Like, even though it doesn't fit a lot of my definitions of classic horror, I still go Shining is the quintessential for me. You're uneasy the whole movie, like a thriller, but it's punctuated by these images of violence and just disturbing imagery combined with music and acting that is just creepy and doesn't matter. In 100 years, watch that movie and you'll be creeped out by it.
No, and I think actually, The Shining and Silence Lambs are perfect bookends on each side of the thriller horror line.
I agree.
I think Shining 100% lean is just enough with the blood coming down the elevators.
Way more than Silence
and Supernatural. Yeah, I think absolutely those are the two that are on the line, because someone could argue that The Shining is much more a thriller. And what's funny about Stephen King, everyone calls Stephen King the master of horror. Whereas most of Stephen King's works are so metaphorical, like beyond metaphor. I mean, The Shining's about an alcoholic. It's literally all The Shining is about. It's about a man coming to grips with with alcoholism and falling prey to it. That is what that book is about. It was really King's fight with cocaine in his personal life when he wrote it. And you can literally watch that movie and be like, oh, I understand. All of this is just a psychological representation of addiction. And that's all it is. And that's kind of interesting that King's always known as the master of horror, whereas I don't ever find most of King's stuff to be horrific. I find it to be disturbing because it's psychological.
Well, if you're talking to King, he would have preferred the Steven Weber TV version. That's way more Kubrick than King.
But what's the what's the real world representation of The Shining? I mean, ultimately, when it comes down to it, I mean, Stephen King's just a super inventive person, but always had that kind of base in real life sort of thing. Were there any other movies that definitely just stuck out to you always growing up?
Or in
your experience,
I got into horror late, and ended up seeing a lot of the super fucked up shit like Dead Alive, which is just Peter Jackson going just ape shit. I Spit on Your Grave, sexploitation films pushing the envelope, but. There's just enough there. And the thing is, my appreciation for horror, Alison Carter, living with Alison Carter definitely got my appreciation up a little more, because there's so many...
Who's in Largo the next 2 months. And
I don't know who Alison Carter is.
You never met Alison? You gotta hang out with us. But
for our listeners out there, Alison Carter is a person, not a movie or an actress.
Yeah. And she kind of bridged the gap between even the schlockiest of horror to the higher end, more artistic films.
High end.
When you think about like what is horror today, I think that still truly it's punctuated by these like violent images. But I remember feeling horrified at It Follows, and that doesn't have a bit of gore. And I think most people might even say that's more of a thriller, more of a suspense, because that's what the whole premise is based on.
That's supernatural.
Oh, I think that's 100% horror.
But the visceral feeling of being hunted, and it's so well done that I even though it doesn't fit any of the rules that I myself put forth,
it's supernatural.
It does have that one thing.
No, I think 100% it.
To me, that's why I have my two rules. You know, supernatural and
it is the definitive monolith. I mean, that is the monolith. That's almost they almost put some sort of spin on the monolith of just being like, oh, they can literally only move at one speed.
Yeah, well, and it's similar also when you look at something like the Babadook, which is. The Babadook is literally just about coming to grips with the death of a father. I mean, it's literally all that's very Stephen King-ish of coming to of father husband, right?
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting movie, but I
love that movie.
It's one of those that once I kind of latched onto where they were going with it, it stopped being scary for me just because it was emotional. There was definitely an emotional pull for me on it, but it wasn't scary anymore. I'm like, oh, I understand. This is the monster that lives in the basement is coming to grips with this moment in your life and all of that stuff. Yeah. And so for me, the only one I want to get into, and I've kind of talked about most of the ones in throughout the rest of the podcast, but one I haven't talked about, and I don't think we've talked about a lot on the air, is this little gem.
They're here.
Now,
so that was the one I wanted to put on my list, and I didn't because I knew you were going to bring it up, because I think Poltergeist is one of the greatest horror films of all time, and manages to be relatively accessible for a lot of different audiences.
Well, and this is what was so interesting about my
never liked Poltergeist. I've seen it. It was a long time ago.
Movie.
I remember not being scared. I remember being bored as a kid.
So good.
It first of all, what I love about it is
it's a Spielberg movie.
It's E.T. It's fucking E.T.
Poor Toby Hooper.
Yeah.
And who did a Texas Chainsaw, I think.
Yeah. Well,
Didn't he do Texas?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, poor Toby.
I love that Spielberg has never directed a horror movie other than Jaws, his first big blockbuster, and
not a
quote
horror
unquote
film.
Poltergeist.
I say it's a creature feature.
But what's really interesting with Poltergeist for me is that I was very little when I saw it, like really little. I was probably Carol Ann's age with that. But my parents were okay with it because it was
PG.
like a Spielberg. Yeah,
it was PG.
It's a fucking Spielberg movie, right?
Even though it has a scene where a guy rips off his own face.
Yeah, it is, and it is terrifying. It is one of the very few movies that, to this day, the scene in the pool where they've got all of
where the thing comes out of the closet, fucking terrified. I had nightmares about that.
That movie never scared me as a kid.
Now what's funny, Ben, is so I've been researching the Halloween Horror Nights this year because there's a Poltergeist house at Halloween Horror Nights where you enter through the pool. That's where it starts.
Oh,
my brother, of course, is terrified about the clown bit, which looks pretty awesome in the house. But
does a tree eat people?
First of all, no. They have the thing that comes out of the closet, and they've built it into this animatronic that comes jutting out of a window, and I literally just saw a video of it, and I popped back in my chair because it fucking terrified me, and it is the one thing that will, even though I know it's coming, it is going to terrify me at it. And that film is, first of all,
it does world building so well. I mean, because it builds this you an hour into the movie, you have this entire understanding of an alternate dimension that they never fucking show.
Well,
it's amazing.
It punches one of my buttons as a kid, which is I had terrible abandonment issues. I don't know why. I was never abandoned at any point in my life other than my brother losing me at the Kentucky State Fair in 1988. He knows what he did, and he got in trouble for it. But this is way before that. I was terrified when little kids were taken away from their families. It would fuck with my head. And the idea of Carol Ann...
You should get a job at a border patrol.
And I go, this is just a little girl that likes to watch TV real close to it. I identify with her. Oh, that thing came out of the TV and grabbed her and pulled her into the TV. Now her family has to go find her. I was like, fuck that.
But,
I don't like this.
But you know the scene where
You know what's happening in real life too. Speaking of horror film, just turn on Fox News.
There we go. Right. But you know the scene where her mom walks up and whatever, and there's this, you hear the noises like the boom, 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 and then all of a sudden she's like, she's like, I felt her. And she was just like, I smell, and like whatever, and she's walking around like everybody. That scene breaks me. It's so emotional. It's so wonderful, and it's immediately preceded by the boom, 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 and then she's just like, something's coming, or whatever. That movie is so fucking good, dude.
Is amazing.
It's such a good movie.
Poltergeist, it just hits me, and I love it. And I remember I went and watched, because I'd seen the original Poltergeist.
Right.
I went in 80, I think it was 87, to the drive-in with my mom to watch Poltergeist 2.
Yeah.
That's some real Marty McFly shit. You went to the drive-in with your mom?
Now, first of all, Mike, do you want to know what I wanted to watch at the drive-in that night?
Porky?
Short Circuit.
Oh, of course.
Which was showing on another screen. So we went, but she goes, no, I want to watch Poltergeist 2.
Now,
so
one of the great villain performances of all time, though, in that movie.
In Poltergeist 2?
In Poltergeist 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. You mean you want to talk about...
Are you lost, sweetheart? Are you afraid, honey?
The dying.
Well, why don't you come with me?
The
Poltergeist 2?
The priest in Poltergeist 2. God is good.
So
is the creepiest. That movie is not good.
It's not a good movie, but
is a terrifying villain.
Yeah, the villain.
Catholic priest?
Yes. Straight up.
As if you needed
he's
to tell me.
He's literally Wilbur, or with the guy from Family Guy, the old pedophile, Herbert. He's exactly that guy, just like a little creepier and...
Are you lost, sweetheart?
Are you scared?
Nah,
so good.
But I mean, literally, the actor was dying of cancer and looks... I mean, it looks like something
he
that...
died like before the movie opened.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But so it's like his entire... He just looks like a skeleton.
He plays a gaunt old preacher that told all of his congregation the world was coming to an end, and when he realized it wasn't going to happen, he took them into a cave and killed all of them. And so when he died, they didn't let him go to hell. They made him a monster, a demon. And he goes and haunts Caroline. It's great. It's actually pretty good world building. The movie's not great, but he's very,
You're building off the original Poltergeist, which has, but like you said, it's E.T. It's just Spielberg beats in a horror movie, and it doesn't have gore, like explicit gore, except for maybe the one scene where the guy rips his face off. But it was it was a lack of gore enough to at least make them make it a PG movie. And that's the reason why I saw it at such a young age, and that's the reason why I'm still kind of scarred today.
That's why I'm so glad that there's no longer snow on TVs. Like you can't lose reception and get that snow screen, because that's where the fucking demons live.
Jesus Christ,
and
man.
that shit. But anyway, are there any closing thoughts?
One last thing I want to close on.
All right.
I'd be remiss.
Hail Sagan.
I'd be remiss if I did not say John Carpenter's The Thing.
Well, it is a great movie.
I feel like it perfectly blends horror and suspense in that one scene where they're trying to figure out... Well, it's sci-fi, but like that's a horror film to me, man.
That was the step up. That was the next step
it's
from
Alien. If Alien is a horror film, then The Thing is a horror film.
100%. No, 100%. Yeah. I think that it was the next step in sci-fi horror. Absolutely.
No, it's great. No, it's great because it's cat and mouse. There's a mistaken identity type thing in there. It's awesome.
It has like well earned kind of the thing. One of the things that I always hate about horror films is like the jump scare, like how that's become something that's so prolific in films nowadays. It's like, oh, you have to do the jump scare, like that's what you have to do.
It's called The Nun now.
Right, exactly.
N-O-N-E.
And I actually like some movies like The Conjuring and The Visit. There are some modern horror movies I like, and obviously The Witch was in and of itself its own thing, but doesn't really rely on any jump scares whatsoever. It's all about atmosphere. But the jump scare when he does the paddles through the guy's chest, where he just goes and the thing just bites his arms off. I remember seeing that at a young age, just being like, I mean, there was nothing that ever made me go, oh shit,
oh god, oh my god. I can't believe that all those guardians are still standing. Oh my god! How did you not knock anything over just
That was
now?
impressive.
Because
I
I
liked
was doing that on purpose.
Unreal.
Well,
I only knock stuff over when I'm not trying to be like that.
this is true. This is true.
And you were trying really hard not to knock anything over because that was amazing.
So hopefully, tonight's podcast has whetted your appetite. Sorry, whetted your appetites for a little Halloween discussion coming in a few weeks. Just a few short weeks. We're gonna have a guest in the studio next week. I don't know who it's gonna be yet. We're gonna talk about that after the episode. But someone else will be here in Nick Santa Croce's. I don't know why I made you fully Baltimore for the first time in your life. Nick Santa Croce's seat, his fragrant Rick and Morty seat. But someone will be sitting in for Nick next week because he's better than us, and this is how he slowly works his way out of the podcast by moonlighting on other bigger, more important podcasts until he leaves us and he only comes back for guest shots.
Talk about horror. I'm horrified that I'll not be here for your 69th episode. It's a crime.
This is true. You guys are coming up on episode 69.
Crime.
And if you think we're not going to talk about that every 2 minutes, you're wrong. It's going to happen all the time. We thank you so much for listening. You can absolutely call in.
Good. All right.
The number is 6969696. And then, all right.
I can just say 9.
You just say 9. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you on the 69th episode of the New Way podcast. Cheers.
Cheers.